So as I mentioned, welcome. We are here today to finish what we were doing last time and studying the chapter 3.2 of Resonance with this last bit on music as a way to make some qualitative determination to our relationship to the world, to implement a qualitative determination in our relationship to the world. And we are going to see that by comparing several media, which is to say music in films or music in video and films, as opposed to literature. So let's, I need to share the screen now and go towards the text with you. Plus, that's not how I share the screen, I always forget. Partager l'écran is right there. Partager. And here we are. You see the text? Should I make it bigger?
We can see the text.
So, particularly revealing in this, so let's read the last sentence that we ended up with. Thus, a critique of modern relations here.
Yeah.
Thus, a critique of modern relations of resonance, if it wishes to be truly comprehensive, will ultimately not be able to avoid devoting systematic attention to the transformation of our relationships to the world in the course of their digitalization. So, as you remember, as we are mediated to the world through many digital tools, the goal of Hartmut Rosa here is to better describe how those digital tools impact on this relationship. Should we read this paragraph again, maybe?
Yeah.
I'm sure we did read this one. I'm not sure we read the one below. We read the one starting with this passage here. When we check our email inbox for new messages, when we delight in gaining new Facebook friends and Twitter followers, when we check to see whether our latest posts or blog entries have elicited reactions in the form of comments or likes, or whether anyone has clicked through to our homepage or bought our books or records, what we are really concerned with at bottom is being noticed, seen, addressed, contacted, being in touch with the world. So even though it looks like we are only dealing with the digitalized version of the world, it is still a concern with the world, with being in contact with the world that we are expressing through those tools. In this sense, digital media, without a doubt, have the character of axes of resonance. And so it is no wonder that we jump at every vibration of our smartphone in our pocket, as every incoming message represents a call from the world. Someone else would read?
Yeah, I can read.
Yeah, please.
It is astonishing, then, that all of these resonant signals, large and small, seem to have no lasting effect. As every web surfer, blogger, and Twitter user, as indeed nearly every smartphone or PC user knows, the half-life of feeling assured of digital resonance appears to be inversely proportional to the ever-growing quantity of incoming signals of resonance, leading to a form of increasingly addictive behavior. We must assure ourselves at ever shorter intervals that our number of friends is growing, that we are being noticed in the world, that our text and email channels are still intact, and we feel forgotten in an indifferent world where the flow of resonant signals ebbs or stops, even if only temporarily.
You remember we did read this part with the
Yeah.
question of addiction.
Do you want me to
Continue.
carry on?
Yeah.
Okay. Similarly, watching the uncommonly aesthetic stimulating, multicolored, polymorphic, rhythmically pulsing and changing patterns displayed by modern media players to visualize the music one is listening to seems not to trigger any emotionally resonant effects. Here, the experience of one's own lack of resonance resulting from the incongruity between symbolic displays and aesthetic experience can at times be genuinely irritating. Thus, a critique of modern relations of resonance, if it wishes to be truly comprehensive, will ultimately not be able to avoid devoting systematic attention to the transformation of our relationship to the world in the course of their digitalization.
Yeah, how did these technologies affect or transformed our relationship to the world? How did they impact the relationships we already had to the world by making us different subjects, different agents? Let's consider this a bit further with the passage on music. Gilly, if you wish to read more, you're very welcome.
Particularly revealing in this regard is the fact that the relational quality lacking in our screen-mediated relationship to the world can in certain contexts be established by different means, namely through music. The idea of telling a story via the screen without music, whether in the form of a film or even a news report, has become practically unthinkable. A fact that is illuminating both in terms of analysing how we relate to the world through the screen, as well as in terms of understanding how music functions. Neither oral narratives nor books require music in order to create a world to and through which the listener can read or can relate. Yet films without music appear to lack this very quality. Films, even more so than books, have no problem communicating content or visualizing factual contexts and connections, yet they're scarcely capable of lending their images an emotional quality, or more specifically, they're incapable of conveying the basic mood of a narrative, and thus of establishing a resonant relationship to the viewer. This is the function taken on by film music, which indicates how the people on screen are situated in the world and relate to the world. On its own, a film scene, say of a living room or a landscape at sunset, can be associated with any number of different forms of relation to the world, with loneliness, melancholy, anxiety or alienation, or with relaxation, contentment, serenity, or a feeling of being at home, or with a sense of danger and suspense. It's generally the underlaid music that specifies and conveys the quality of the intended relationship. Music thus becomes the medium through which films or movie theatres generate resonance effects and touch their audiences, including when the music drops out at especially intense moments, producing an audible silence.
So you see here, there's something really interesting that we can name intermediality. I think I've mentioned this word before in the previous phase of this course. So it's when two media are used in combination, in interconnection. Here we have the medium film, which is used with the medium music, which can be called the medium cinema together. Maybe cinema is a medium composed of several media. And thus it achieves certain effects, which is, for instance, to specify the mood the director feels like creating. And you can, all of you, you can think of specific films where the music has this particular importance. As I was thinking of films, I remembered one in particular called in English 400 Blows.
Oui, les 400 coups.
Les 400 coups de Truffaut. It's one of the most famous movies of the French New Wave. And so let's talk about Les 400 coups first, and I will find an excerpt at some point. in Les 400 coups, you have the image of Paris in black and white, and that's a choice. They could have had a colored image of Paris. So that kind of give a tonality in some way. But it's not very specific because black and white can actually create many moods, right? It can create a mood of, as you know, maybe the movie The Artist,
Yeah.
we chose to represent Hollywood in black and white.
Yeah.
So that was to create a mood of old cinema. And you have other movies that create décalage, a discrepancy between black and white and or certain lack of color and color, such as Stalker. Maybe you've seen Stalker by Tarkovsky.
No.
During the first phase of the film, there's no coloration. And then when they arrive in the zone, in what is called the zone, suddenly the nature become colored or colorized.
There's another film though, Rumblefish,
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Pat Dillon in the 80s. Do you remember that one, Julie?
I do.
Where Mickey Rourke, he's the central character, isn't he, in lots of ways? And that starts off black and white, and then the clouds, and it's very atmospheric. And I think the music was by Stuart Copeland. I might be slightly wrong in that, but it's just so evocative. When you mention little things like just color, it triggers something off in film, doesn't it?
Hey, it does trigger something, but something that's not very specific yet. And with the help of other technical means, technical techniques, if you will, the mood can be asserted more specifically. And with the music, it's really so specific that even words are not as descriptive as the music itself. So you can certainly describe the music that is played, the music off in cinema terminology. We differentiate the music in, which is the music played by instruments inside the film, and the music off played by just to accompany the film, right? And the music off creates a very melancholy atmosphere that goes with the face of the main character, who is a melancholy child, not loved by his mom, not taken care of very well by his parents. That's the least we can say. And I would say that the music is more specific than words we can find. We can find the word melancholy, yet it's a certain tone of melancholy that is very singular in this movie.
Is it the case that you could, with the other techniques, if you took music away, so you've got the script, you've got the facial expressions, you've got the the camera work, the technique, all those other things, and so I think you could potentially get to that understanding in the viewer of melancholy, but perhaps you would need to spend more time doing so.
Yeah,
more lines, more layering, and so on. So music is the case that it provides a shortcut. It's
more
easy...
expedient, exactly. But also you can assert that the intermediality between the image, let's say the face of the kid, or you could have the same idea with if you don't remember, the 400 Blows with the kid by Charlie Chaplin. The face of the kid, or Charlot, the main character, and the music in combination, intermediality, creates a specific mood. It's the match of those two things. And you remember we were talking about multiplicity and the fact of saying that if you have singular points that you create relationship between them, it creates a singular object out of collective things.
Yeah. So it's what's this? The sum of it's more than the sum of its parts, we say in English.
Exactly. Okay. Good point.
I think also, if you know the background, like with Charlie Chaplin, I know I've read quite a few books on him. If you didn't have the music and you saw the child, I think you would feel very, very strongly for him, because you know the background, because you have some context. And maybe music creates, I mean, I know there's research done and there's certain notes that put you in a state of mind, but music can also create a context. So when you have the scary music, you know that that's going to be scary. So your mind automatically goes to that context.
And it's even more than scary. Scary is just a word we describe, but scary is just a big word. There are many things that can be put in the bag scary. All the scary movies, which are very different. Lately, I watched 2 scary movies. The one called Get Out, which is very, very good if you haven't seen it. And Us, which is disappointing, I think, compared to Get Out, same director. And those scary movies, they are very different from one another, but the music would make this particular kind of shade of scary, you know? Okay, let's go a bit further into music thus becomes the medium through which films. In this sentence, we really understand how intermediality works. Music thus becomes the medium through which films generate resonant effects and touch their audience, including when the music drops out at especially intense moments, producing an audible silence. Again, the theme of silence reappear in our course, which is interesting. And Deleuze was mentioning, or actually stating, that music has a specific relationship with silence, and it is even its goal is to create silence, because music is a very, very specified kind of noise. It's noise that is actually so controlled that respects silence. It is the noise that respects silence, and in this sense creates it. Okay.
Just before you go on, we have a term in radio called basket, and the basket is the music in the background for somebody who's presenting something or other. And that brings me that the music is the basket and everything else gets put into it. It's just a thought.
In which field? Which field?
Radio.
In radio, okay.
Yeah.
The basket, okay.
Antoine,
I'll
before...
be back in 10 seconds.
Okay.
But you can talk.
Whilst Antoine's doing that, there was something that I heard on the radio this afternoon on Radio 4, which was, it's a program called Open Book, where obviously they talk about books. And it was about a Jenny Openbach, who's a German writer and writes often about Berlin as a place and about refugees and so forth. And she was saying that when it came to writing, that or reading, and that in a way you're listening when you're actually reading, you're listening out for the words and everything else, and the change of speed, the tempo, the vowels, and that what she inbuilds into when she writes is that she expects the reader to be silent after what they've read, so that they can digest it almost. So I wonder if that isn't the same for us with music in a certain way. We're so touched by a piece, we need to absorb it.
Yeah, I think you can argue, as you are probably doing, that when someone reads a text is actually somehow a musician.
Yeah.
So reads the text out loud, of course.
Well,
Okay.
I think there are some examples here of people that can read something really smoothly and fluently and get all the words out. And so it does become musical. And I think that to the ear, that has got its own, and the words there, it's got its own aesthetic. It's got its own, yeah, it is important.
Yeah, and Mallarmé, the famous French poet, was arguing that in the end, or to use a Bernie's expression, at the end of the day, poetry is a very large form of art, which is musicality.
Okay.
So let's go a bit further in this text. What does this mean for our understanding of the specific relation to the world that music is capable of establishing as another medium for relating to the world through the body and senses? The question of whether and to what extent music can be understood as a language, sign system, or symbolic medium is a highly controversial subject of philosophical and scientific debate. It seems evident to me, however, that at the least, tones, sounds, rhythms, and melodies convey an irreducible aesthetic excess above and beyond their figurative character of or significance that opens up a specific realm of experience inaccessible to other languages or symbolic sign systems. Sorry, I didn't read very well. And I think here is said very well, but in a complex way, that you cannot replace a certain music by words.
There's something further than this, though. Again, on Radio 4, it was probably during the middle of the night. There was a guy who knew that he was never going to be a professional musician, in that he came from a working class family. This is a guy in the States, in California, and his little sister had learning difficulties.
Yeah.
And she was non-verbal.
Yeah.
But he could make her, well, it's not that he could make it, she would sing in her own way. But more importantly, when she was within her group of other people that were seen to have, inverted commas, learning disabilities, one of the things they loved, and this was in the early 70s, was dancing to music. Mm-hmm. So they were non-verbal, but they were communicating, and they were converging through the means that music allowed them to express themselves. So it's so powerful, isn't it? Music in itself, and that music, it vibrates us.
My daughter also being autistic, and a lot of the, she has this rare condition, and a lot of the people I notice on the website, because there's younger children, because she was the second one to be diagnosed with it, and they all love music. And you know, which actually kills the autistic bit of loud noises always hurt, because I think it's quite selective loud noises as well for a lot of people. There are autistic people that don't like loud noises and they do that. But most people that I've come across who've been autistic and on the autistic spectrum enjoy music.
Maybe there's a rhythm to it, there's a language to it, there's a logic to it as well. Perhaps that can be soothing in its own self.
Yes.
Yeah, the important word is irreducible. Okay. The point that the author is trying to make, I would argue, is that there is an irreducibility of this medium, music, and maybe an irreducibility of each medium. That is a point that Derrida makes often, the irreducibility of the writing language compared to of the written language, as opposed to the spoken language.
I think music is even more irreducible even more reducible than language, because even in written language, you got sort of spoken language, difficult, written language a bit less difficult, and then music underneath that, because even with written language you can get miscommunication or misapprehension of what it is.
And my daughter can't read and write, but she loves music and she can remember songs and sit, and so that part of the language works with her. You know, and yet the reading and writing doesn't.
I guess that there is a pattern to language that needs to be learnt, and then there is a pattern to music, which you know, is there, but perhaps we don't need to learn the pattern of music in the same way. Is that an important element to it?
I think we're talking about accessibility, aren't we? I think with music, it has. It grabs you in a different way towards than language, as was just mentioned there. You still need to. You can appreciate music. You don't have to get to the point of saying that, oh, just because someone else has done it, I'm not going to listen to it, or you know, get spiteful about it. It moves you in a certain way. Whereas I think with good books, with books, you're right, there's a pattern to the language, but also there's, in terms of accessibility, it just seems that much harder. Whether it's a code in terms of the writing, as Susie was kind of mentioning about her daughter, but there's just something more. There's a context, there's a lexicon, there's everything else that goes in it. I mean, come on, someone's relating this to us.
It's interesting because she's on the Audible for the library, our local library, and she listens to audiobooks. You know, that she could not, that normally she would be reading, but she's not, because she can't. So it's interesting that she can relate. She relates to the story and all the other things, but she can't read it.
Well, it sounds like she's getting it.
Here in our conversation, we are dealing with the intersection between accessibility and irreducibility. Indeed, the fact that the medium are different makes them accessible differently by the people who don't have access to a medium. They can have access to another medium because they are more gifted for that other medium. And let's go a bit further into the argumentation that the author is trying to make. Scott, would you read further? Here I would like to advance.
Sure. Here I would like to advance the admittedly speculative hypothesis that the peculiar quality of music lies in its ability to produce a highly specific form of relating to the world, one in which our relationship to the world as a whole becomes tangible and thus can be both modulated and modified. Music, in a way, negotiates the quality of relation itself, whereas languages and sign systems can only ever thematize one particular relationship to or segment of the world at a time. This is precisely what makes music suitable as a relationship establishing medium to accompany film, though it is no content of its own, nor does it provide any cognitive reference point.
Thank you. So two remarks I'd like to make. The first one is, do you notice how careful the writer is with his choice of words? I use the word determines, but he prefers the word negotiates. Negotiate the quality, negotiate the quality of relation itself. And to him, negotiate is a way he further express the idea of modulating and modifying. Modulating and modifying what? Our relationship, our relationship to the world. And I was wanting to say the quality, but it's not necessary. That's what he meant by that. It is, the idea here is that, according to him, maybe he's wrong. We can discuss that. He doesn't seem to have a scientific proof here, but maybe it's still interesting to consider it, to consider what he conceptualizes. So he's saying that with words, whereas languages and sign system, and that's where I want to go back to the previous paragraph. So he's opposing music to languages and sign systems. And in a way, you can say that music can be based on a sign system, right? Which is the way you write music for it to be played. But the way you write music is not music.
We were talking about that in our orchestra, and we came to the conclusion that music was kind of more mathematical, interestingly. And maybe that makes it easier for some people and harder for some people.
Yeah, a music sheet is a symbolic medium to represent music, yet it is not music itself, which is in itself a different medium, right? So if during a film you show a music sheet, which is a representation of what music can be, it will not have on most people, unless you are a professional musician who directly translate into your head a music sheet into melodies in your brain, it will not have the same effect as playing music, right? So I think he has a strong argument here, which is that, yes, we can communicate with music, but that doesn't mean music is a language. It doesn't mean that music is a sign system. It can be based on, it can be represented by a sign system, yet it is not a sign system.
Especially if you play by ear, because then it's like a memory as well.
Yeah,
a pattern.
Good point. So, and he says, if we are dealing with languages and sign systems, they don't modulate and modify the relationship to the world. They thematize it, sematize it. So, for instance, if I use the word scary, and in a phrase such as, "Oh yeah, this film is so scary," talking about Get Out, for instance, I will thematize the idea of scariness, right? But I won't have the specific quality, or if you will, texture that you have in the movie Get Out as you experience it.
That's why it's the seventh art.
That's why what?
That's why it's called the seventh art.
Yeah, that's why it's an art in itself, with its irreducibility. Even though it is a complex or compound of different media, making it an intermediate art, it is irreducible.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question on the line? One in which our relationship to the world as a whole becomes tangible.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand what that means. So it means that my relationship to the world as a whole is something which is always there and that music uncovers it, or that it distills a specific relationship I'm feeling at the time to the world. I don't know what my relationship to the world is, so how can music make it tangible?
So before trying to answer your question, I will just thank you for spotting this word, which is indeed so interesting when I have just mentioned the word texture, because tangible here is the very word, the adjective through which the author is trying to touch the texture, if you want. So let's read this sentence again to make sure we understand it. Here, I would like to advance the admittedly speculative hypothesis, so it's modest, that the peculiar quality and he does mention the idea of quality. The peculiar quality of music lies, so if you will, here music as a whole, not such or such music, right?
Yeah.
Music in its difference from other art. The peculiar quality of music lies in its ability to produce a highly specific form of relating to the world, one in which our relationship to the world as a whole becomes tangible and thus can be both modulated and modified.
I mean, it sounds to me a little bit like, you know, if I look at it from a slightly more jaded point of view, I'm watching a film, there's some heartstring tugging music. I'm feeling much more sad for the boy than I thought I was going to, because the music is now, and now my emotions are being modulated and I'm, you know, sort of being played. So is it that, or is it actually that my emotions are much purer and more real underneath, and the music is allowing me to express that relationship to the world in a more meaningful, genuine way?
Surely it's the same as resonance. It depends on how you receive what you hear and how you feel from the receptiveness of what you hear. Because if he's saying that it's what's that word,
Irreducibility, whatever.
It's almost saying the opposite there, to being tangible and being modulated and modified.
Exactly. That's why it sort of slightly jarred with me. That,
but he did say peculiar. He said speculative hypothesis that the peculiar quality of music lies in its ability to produce a highly specific form of relating to the world, and then he goes on to say it's the quality. There's a certain quality of some music, doesn't he? He doesn't say all of it.
Yeah.
When he's talking about the tangibility, he's talking about some of it. When he's talking about the irreducible, he's talking about the whole of the music as a whole, I presume.
We were talking about film, so I'm assuming that it would hold true to film music. And personally, I find a lot of film music overdone, over sentimental, or over, you know, played, really. I just find it irritating. And so that's just me. However, if I was to listen to a lovely Vaughan Williams piece while walking in the countryside, I would perhaps feel a bit less as if my what was the phrase, my emotions were being you know, modulated.
Can I just add though, that sometimes, even if you know that you're being played, as it were, by a piece of music, you know, like in the film The Mission with Jeremy Irons, and you go through all of that with Jeremy Irons and Robert De Niro and the Indians and all the rest of it.
I have the soundtrack.
Yeah, but
I have the soundtrack. It's great.
Yeah, it's absolutely great, but you kind of know that but there's something, or Roger Bannister doing the 4 Minute Mile up, you know, round. And there was a bit of music that went with that. There are certain bits of music. I don't know if they're just there to lift you, but you know that it's too much. But in actual fact, you don't mind that. You know, you want that. At the end of the film, when I watched The Mission, I wanted to cry. Yeah. That's how I felt. And hearing that bit of music, because it's soaring and uplifting at that point, then I wasn't feeling that. And that film I haven't seen for 40 years. But in my mind, I've got it there enough to express to you. So I don't, to my mind, I don't mind that schmaltzy bit there.
But so maybe it's about authenticity. Maybe it's about quality and authenticity.
Yeah, perhaps it is.
You remember that, I think it's Coleridge, the 19th century poet, who was talking about, as regards fiction, the fact that there was a pact between the reader and the writer, and the pact had to do with a certain suspension of disbelief. The fact that you agree to be told a story that you would not believe otherwise, because you enjoy all the moods through which you go by being told this story. I think it's a bit the same with the film music. I'd like to come back to one sentence that we maybe did not insist on enough. This
Could I just say that in the radio, I quite often have to listen to film pieces that people have chosen, and they still have that sense of the music, whether it's because in my mind I have the visuals, but there's always that strength of the music. I mean, you get something like Phantom of the Opera. I love some of the music in that, and you listen to it without any visuals and stuff, and it still has that quality.
Yeah.
You know the radio show On Being?
Say again.
Krista Tippett.
On Being, yeah, with Krista Tippett. She interviewed the film music composer. With the one who composed Babel and other great films music. And he was saying that to him, as a film music composer, it was really important to visualize his music. So I think you have a point here that those people who have specified their careers in the field of music for films, they have a visual understanding of music. Okay, let's move on to answer Gilly's question. To the sentence here, do you see where I put the arrow? This is the function taken on by film music, which indicates how the people on screen are situated in the world and relate to the world. So in a way, what the music makes you do is to identify yourself to the mood felt by the characters.
That's just like resonance then.
Exactly. It puts you in resonance with the characters. The music builds a relationship, a qualitative relationship, or actually negotiates with modulations and modifications. The qualitative relationship to the world that both the characters and you have during these the scenes, right? And let's go a bit further with the idea of touch here. I think it's when we were saying tangible, music thus becomes the medium through which films generate resonant effects and touch their audience. You see how he puts it between quotation marks? And it's a way of emphasizing it in a way. It's saying it's touch in a metaphorical way, of course, but even more than that. And you might know that, you might have noticed by now that Rosa Hartmut is, or actually Hartmut Rosa, is a German writer, and another German writer who has written on that, less specifically, but very famously, is Heidegger. And Heidegger uses a Latin word, which is the word dispositio. So he says, Heidegger says, that to be Dasein, to be, let's say, human being, to simplify, it is to be in the world. It is Dasein, to be there with the world around you, to be put in the world somewhere. And you're never there, according to Heidegger, and I think he's really right on this point, you're never in the world as a human being with no mood at all. You're never there objectively feeling nothing. You're always there with feelings about such or such things around you, about the whole landscape. The landscape never appears to you free of emotion. You're never free of emotions. Therefore, what if we come back to the idea of the music for films, the music for films creates is a dispositio, a certain way of feeling towards the world. And so we come back to your question, Gilly, which was here, I think. Here, I would like to advance the admittedly speculative hypothesis that the peculiar quality of music lies in its ability to produce a highly specific, and I think that's the important point here, highly specific, more specific than language, form of relating to the world. So a dispositio is a highly specific form of relating to the world. A dispositio, or if you will, a mood, or a qualitative, how does he say? A peculiar quality, you see, he insists on peculiar quality, highly specific, or singular, if you will, is determined by the music, which is even more specific than words can be.
I think it was the phrase, my relationship to the world as a whole, that sort of flung me out a bit there.
Yeah, you were wondering if the relationship to the world as a whole existed before the music or after the music.
I was wondering whether I have one. It feels like a big claim.
Can this, but I just, that last sentence to me, I just filtered it in a very certain way. For instance, if I'm in France and I'm listening to some Jacques Brel, he might be Belgian, or some Serge Gainsbourg or something, that the music will mean something completely different to me over there, and I'll want it to mean something else as well. So is that idea about relationship to the world as a whole, is it something that we create within ourselves in terms of a resonance that we want?
Good question. I think we still have to question what it means. I'm not sure I have a complete understanding of what he means when he says to the world as a whole. But I think what is the most important here in this passage is what we pointed out. Let's go a bit further in the text to see if we understand.
I just want to say, surely that what comes into that is a person's experience of the world to be able to make a relationship. And therefore, the same with music as well. If you haven't got a relationship to the world, music will mean something very different to you. I don't know what it would sound like, because I believe I do have a relationship to the world, but it would sound different. So therefore, when you're in France and you have a relation to that part, the specific music or specific music that's being played is part of that relationship that you have with the world that you're in at that point.
Yeah, totally.
So
it's to do with experience as well, I should imagine.
I think it's all the more important, sorry, Susie, it's all the more important when you're not that sure of your place in that world, I think. So I think the music probably plays a more significant, has that importance. And I think it's the same with teenagers, isn't it? We think back to our teenage years and what music we liked and what it made us do in terms of mood or action or sentimentality or whatever. I think it does determine, it is determined by your place in it.
But we could also question Gillies when she says she feels almost like she's been manipulated and spoon-fed. So
Very
that
true.
could change us as well. And it can happen in music and films.
Thank you.
Yeah. I had this experience, maybe a film we have all seen called La Vita è Bella. the Benigni film on the Nazi period, where he plays a clown, kind of, in the Nazi camps. And I don't know if you've seen that movie several times. I saw this movie by myself in the Champs-Élysées in Paris, and I was so moved by it that I cried for half an hour after the film was finished. And then I saw it again and again, a bit like other movies such as Forrest Gump and other movies that are very popular. And at some point, I couldn't tolerate the music of this film anymore. The music was too heavy and too, there's a word for that, tear-jerker. Tear-jerking.
Yeah.
That's a bit like me with Death in Venice. I was an usherette in the cinema and I was listening to it, and watching it every single, session. And it became so melancholy. It was almost too much.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting what Antoine says. At the beginning, you saw it the first time and it transported you emotionally so much that it had an impression on you for a good length of time. And the way that Susie's established it, it's almost that if you see too much of it, you build up an opposite reaction almost. Perhaps there's a fine line between some of these films and just appreciating it for its art and overseeing it. I don't know.
Yeah. And I pity very much the people who work in museums when there are contemporary art installations with short clips, when the music is repeated again and again and again, very, very often. And the people, they have to live day after day with this music. It must be like torture. I think we mentioned that music as a use.
Yeah.
And supermarkets too.
Yeah.
It was Noriega that I think that we spoke of. Noriega, was it in Mexico? It was in some Central American or
El Salvador, I think.
Was it? Okay, there we go. Yeah, got him out.
We did
Well, the Americans wanted him out.
Of the supermarket as well, when we were talking about natural sounds, natural noise, as opposed to civilizational ones. And one thing we mentioned, Susie, as well, is your point. I think you're very right to say that I need to have in some way a relationship to the world as a whole for the music of the film to operate some modification, transformation to my relationship to the world as a whole. Yet, if I understand this passage correctly, I think here we are put into, as you were saying earlier as well, into resonance with the characters who are themselves having a relationship to the world as a whole. So I don't really know what he means by that, by the relationship to the world as a whole. I don't know if he means my relationship as a viewer through the character, or just me, myself, outside the movie. Let's go a bit further to see if we have more answers. Scott, would you read another paragraph?
Can you just put the cursor to the place where I'm meant to be doing this?
Yeah.
From. Thank you.
Yeah.
I can see it. Music suspends the division between self and world, transforming it in a way into a pure relationship. Music is the rhythms, sounds, melodies, and tones. Where am I now?
I don't know.
Well, you thrown me there. Help, people, help. Where am I? Where are the tones?
Middle bit.
Yeah.
Let's start from here. This is precisely
what makes music suitable as a relationship, establishing medium to accompany film, though it has no content of its own, nor does it provide any cognitive reference point. In an aptly titled essay, Peter Sloterdijk pointedly asks, where are we when we hear music? The question is illuminating insofar as the music listener is in fact unable to say whether the music exists outside of or within him. The listener confronts the sound of music differently than the viewer does the seen object. The sound is in himself. The music unleashes physical, emotional, and often also cognitive vibrations in him. Hence, listening to music has a different orientation than seeing, grasping, or feeling. The experience of music suspends the division between self and world, transforming it in a way into a pure relationship. Music is the rhythms, sounds, melodies, and tones between self and world, even if these, of course, have their source in the social world and the world of things. The universe of sound consists in its ability to express or generate all manner of different and differently nuanced relationships, strife, loneliness, desolation, resentment, alienation, and tension, as well as yearning, refuge, security, love, responsivity. This pure relational quality adheres to music in all of us, in all of its manifestations, high culture as well as pop culture, and allows us to comprehend how it is that music and dance have always been so closely linked. Dance, whether ritual and archaic, stylized in the mode of high culture or staged in the mode of pop culture, also involves trying out, experiencing, staging, and modifying different ways of relating to the world, clinging, rebuffing, uniting, etc.
Thank you. So this will make a perfect junction with the next part of the book we will study next week, and for which maybe we will all thank Julie to make a PDF, which is in my French version called La politique, les quatre voies de la démocratie. La politique, les quatre voies de la démocratie. And on my French version, it's page 244. And it's in the horizontal axis of resonance.
I see it. Politics, the four voices of democracy.
Exactly. If you can make a PDF of that, that would be fantastic.
Sure.
What did you say, La politique, les quatre voies de la démocratie? But there was also an overarching title to the book bit. What was that?
And there was it's in the big section called the axis, the horizontal axis, les axes horizontaux de résonance.
Okay, thank you.
And it's called spheres and axes of resonance, but there you go.
Ah.
Is there an English version to it? Because I find it very hard.
Julie's on it. Julie's on it.
Oh, fantastic.
Okay. So
Got a different ending in the English one.
Why is that?
Everyone lives.
You're saying that everyone else is melodramatic.
It's got pictures.
There is some kind of answer maybe to the question that Julie was asking. Can you see an answer to your question in this paragraph or not?
Yes, I did hear it. The ability to express or generate all manner of differently nuanced relationships. Is it that kind of thing?
So that was more the point that I was trying to emphasize. But I think your question
of music suspend the division between self and world, transforming it in a way into a relationship.
Exactly. I think that with the idea that when it comes to music, since it's something that comes from outside but that vibrates inside us, there is a sense that we are one with the world. We make one with the world, and in a sense, the world is the mood we are having. Our mood and the world marry.
I have absolutely no issue with that, and I'm a DJ sometimes, and so I absolutely spend hours thinking about how to make this happen with people on the dance floor. What I think I was struggling with it because we came into it from film music, and potentially because I've been raised on Hollywood films all my life, and their job is a business to make me like the film, and so therefore it's a less pure form of music for me.
Yeah.
So that's why I questioned it in the beginning. Whereas if you're talking about music and dancing, which we just finished on here in this paragraph, that's when I start getting really resonant.
Cool.
The thing is, though, whether it's music with dancing and whether it's music with films, it still creates that relationship of the self to the music, whether it's dance or films. And going back, and I keep on harping on, that's almost like what we've learnt in resonance. It's your own resonance. So yours is the DJ dancing. Somebody else's could be the film and not the dancing, and somebody could be both, you know.
Yeah.
It all depends on our own feeling of resonance towards what we're listening to and what we're not indulging, what's the word, immersed in, or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got our different backgrounds, haven't we, and
Yeah.
our different filters and prejudices, I think, to a
Yeah,
certain
or
extent.
pulled into.
Yeah.
Because, you know, some people love the rich, the famous, and therefore everything they would do would be towards the rich and the famous, including music, you know, because it's their resonance, but it might not be everybody's.
Excellent. Maybe, Susie, do you want to read the next paragraph?
Does it start from only?
Yeah.
Only from this perspective can we understand how, on the one hand, music possesses the power to change the way we are situated in the world, our attunement, while on the other hand, we crave different kinds of music depending on our relationship to the world at a certain moment. Even and especially music that expresses sadness, melancholy, hopelessness, or strife is capable of moving us because we're able to experience it as resonating with our own world. We experience being moved by
Well,
such...
sorry, you missed a line. With our own sadness.
Oh, sorry, with our own sadness, melancholy, and strife, i.e., with our own relationships to the world. We experience being moved by such sounds as something positive, even and especially where we're brought up to tears, and not at all as something that itself makes us depressed. To the contrary, it is when we are no longer touched, moved, or gripped by music that we experience alienation, or in extreme cases, depression, as it is then that we experience the world as mute, even as it is still so loud.
Thank you. So two things. First, there are scientific articles on the fact that this is true, what he states here. We experience being the fact that we are listening to sad music when we accompany with our soul, if you will, this sadness is actually triggering in us positive release of hormones. So sad music doesn't make you sadder if you can actually be attuned to that specific sadness that you hear in the music. Second remark, sorry. Yeah, again, the theme of muteness that we dealt with several times, or mutism, here the muteness of the world. Especially when the noise, be it music or not, be it music heard as noise and not music, is then a form of rejection, a form of non-resonance. Or actually, I'm not expressing myself as well as I should. When the music that is played, one second, when the music that is played around us doesn't find in us an echo or a resonance, it makes us be in a um, non in a bad relationship with the world. What kind of bad relationship to the world? A relationship in which the 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 external stimulations is not something that will accompany our moods, but our mood will fight with it. There's a
I was thinking back
Go
to
ahead.
what Scott was saying.
Yeah.
Scott was saying that. He was saying that if you, what were you saying, Scott? It was.
It was in between that. I hear what it is. I think what I was trying to say is that if the world isn't that concrete to you, and sometimes when you are abroad and living a slightly different lifestyle with different surroundings, you want something to resonate.
Mhm.
You want yourself to resonate with that world. So things like art or music or film become all the more important in that host language to you. You're craving that resonance, so you're looking for it that much more. Say for myself here, in terms of my English identity, I can go without listening to the Beatles for perhaps years, but it's still part of my DNA in a way. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if I'm explaining it that well.
No, you did. And when I was talking about Death in Venice, the way I see what he's written is we experience alienation or extreme case of depression. I'm wondering if you listen to music, that kind of music, too many times, whether our mind makes it into noise as opposed to the beauty of it, and therefore alienates us sometimes.
Or perhaps we just get
Susie, you're talking about the
too
movie.
much.
You're talking about the movie Death in Venice by Visconti?
Yeah. It's just
I didn't get. Yeah, it's the music by Gustav Mahler.
yes, that's it.
Indeed.
Gustav Mahler's, and I love Gustav Mahler music. Don't get me wrong, but after listening to it as an usherette for about a month, I think it was on. I wondered whether it became too much for my brain.
Yeah.
And that it became a noise rather than music. Whereas when I first listened to it, it was more resonating.
Yeah, and so the point you're making is the sense of a healthy rejection of a stimulus that is a form of overdose, actually.
Yeah, desensitization in one way.
Yeah, it was a healthy reaction you had to the overdose of a certain stimulation, which was not espousing, if that word works in English, your capacity to live in the world with this, you know.
But it's interesting because I listened to Woodstock as well around that same area because I was also usher when Woodstock was on. And I didn't feel the same. And all I can put it down to is the type of music that was being played in Mahler's case was so sad that in the end, because I heard it so many times, it desensitized me.
Mm-hmm. I think there's again another more answer to your question, Gilly, in this paragraph. So the idea of where was it? There was the idea that we here, I think.
Was it to do with attunement?
Music is the rhythm, sounds, melodies, and tones between self and world.
Yeah.
Even if these, of course, have their source in the social world and the world of things. The universe of sound consists in its ability to express or generate all manner of different, etc. This pure relational quality adheres to music in all its manifestation. High culture, so the kind of music you're talking about, Susie, with Mahler, high culture, as well as popular culture, Woodstock, and allows us to comprehend how it is that music and dance have always been so closely linked. Okay, that's not what I'm looking for. I think that's here. While on the other hand, we crave different kinds of music depending on our relationship to the world at a certain moment. Yes, that's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
So here in this this first sentence of this paragraph, only from this perspective can we understand how, on the one hand, music possesses the power to change the way we are situated in the world, or attunement, while on the other hand, we crave different kinds of music depending on our relationship to the world at a certain moment. So that means that, yes, Gilly, I think we have an answer now. We have a relationship to the world previous to the music, and the music operates some form of modification on it.
Okay, so in simple English, then we are in a mood of some kind, and the music will either pull us out of our mood or enhance our mood.
So it can trigger.
Yeah, and so I think if your question was, do I have a relationship to the world prior to my experience of that particular music? Yes, I do. And
Mood.
This peculiar music is able, oftentimes, to modify my relationship to the world.
Okay,
in
so it's
the sense
much
that
more
it qualifies my mood.
Yes, it's much more specific and not about my overarching life relationship to the world. I get it. Okay, I got, yeah, makes more sense.
I think so. And Susie, I think we also have a comment made by the text on your comment on the text, which is here with the end of this sentence, while on the other hand, we crave different kinds of music depending on our relationship to the world at a certain moment. Since you are subjected to the same music again and again without your own will, I think that was your experience, you actually craving something different. You're in need of something different, and I guess it explains why music can be used as a form of torture. Is that in a sense it can so much modify or affect the way we connect to the world that it is dangerous to impose it.
But I think my rationalization of my mind realized, because I've listened to Gustav Mahler since then, and it doesn't feel like, I mean, although it felt like torture at the time, I've listened to him since and it didn't feel like torture. So I think what my mind's rationalized the difference of my conditions to the world and relationship to the world at that time. It wasn't a harsh, callous condition. Whereas if you were torturing someone with music, you do more than just torture. It'd be your whole environment and human relationship behind it as well.
Yeah. Maybe
so it's a different kind of sort of trigger, I think.
I'm using the word torture lightly, and sorry if that's.
I wasn't. I was thinking of Gustav Mahler because he's quite heavy.
So let's continue with James, maybe, if you will, read Here Again.
Here again, it should be evident that music, though based on a physical resonance effect conveyed through sound waves and the movement of air, yet establishes a relationship to the world that is not purely physical. The very same notes and sound waves that today were able to move us to tears might produce only a weak or even no resonance effect tomorrow, should our mental capacity for resonance be obstructed or our dispositional relationship to the world be burdened by other events. We see here once again that our relationships to the world are always at one and the same time physically, emotionally, mentally and symbolically mediated. If my contention is correct that music negotiates the quality of relation to the world itself, then we can begin to understand the eminently important function that is capable of fulfilling in modern society. Music affirms and potentially corrects, moderates and modifies our relationship to the world, repeatedly re-establishing it as the relationship from which subject and world originate. This is what Sloterdijk ultimately means when he writes that hearing as a form of going outside oneself is the first gesture of the subject. Above all, proto-subjectivity means feeling an accommodating impulse and vibrating in the greeting. The German pop singer Reinhard May gives expression to this very phenomenon of arousal relationship when he sings. As soon as the first note sounds, the room begins to live and breathe. It's like a trembling, a hovering, as though a spell had overcome us, and a melody liberates us from the maze of our thoughts, opening wide all the floodgates, all the closets of our soul.
Thank you. Very interesting. So, your relationship, it means the relationship at the root of everything, right? Any comments?
Yeah, who is Reinhard May?
You don't want to know. He's going to be leather bound and
Are you sure? We're not talking David Hasselhoff, are we?
that's his stage name.
Okay, that bit's over with.
Sorry.
I thought that, sorry, I just wanted to say though, just looking at something that I wrote down, music based on the physical sound waves and our mental capacity for resonance can be obstructed. For instance, I'm deaf in one ear, I've got a hearing aid on. And it is true that the idea that, yeah, we can pick up through vibrations, but the ability to use our cognition is paramount. Without that, then you are a bit screwed with this to a degree. Yeah?
Yeah.
So it is, and sort of being in the world, we need these capacities in order to draw fun or interest from.
That's what I was getting at when I was talking about we need the experience of the world in order to receive what people are playing and stuff.
Well, I think you're totally right, but and then as soon as you said that, I then wanted to be contrary and think, oh, well, there are people like Helen Keller who are deaf, dumb, even I don't know if, but she was able through the means of touch to find out, and perhaps that's to do with texture in another way. That you can't, but you have to find a common language, whatever that common language is. And I think music normally covers so many bases for me anyway. And I don't know if it touches me more because I often think that, I'm a bit mutton.
Sound has vibrations as well. And I know that quite a few people I've talked to, or partially deaf people, they feel it through vibrations as well.
Yeah,
they can feel, the strength of it.
I think so, but I think rather than about myself, and I've spoken about me, I think it's even more important when you say you're a composer and you like Beethoven. I think they said even towards the end that he wasn't completely deaf, or he wouldn't have been able to compose like he did, unless he just did it straight off the top of his head. But I don't know.
There is a theory, though, that he still heard the music in his head.
Wow.
Which is amazing. And of course, a bit like a sighted person. I was reading about a sighted person who, in fact, it was someone on the telly the other night. He lost his sight when he was 19. He's now a writer and a travel writer, weirdly. And he's 35. And he's starting to lose memory of what the world looks like. And so he has to have these extra inputs and people talk to him and so on. But it's a very, very moving thing to see someone losing that sense and try and cling on to, what's the resonance of that was to him. And just before I finish, Evelyn Glennie is the famous musician and composer who is totally deaf, and I'm not sure ever was hearing. And she uses, she's a percussionist, so that's good. But she uses all of the resonance. She lies on the floor when she's working and when she's looking at dancers and so on, just to really increase all of the information. So it's amazing how we can get round certain blocks.
Yeah.
I remember that film Mandy, you know, the deaf and because I was born deaf and dumb and stuff like that, and I have a partial hearing thing, I know.
Mm.
But I remember Mandy when I was a child, and the way Mandy learnt to talk was a balloon, you know. So it was the vibrations that were helping her to talk and shape and pattern. And to me, that is incredibly interesting, you know, because I work with sound, and I've interviewed people where I haven't even noticed they were deaf, but because I actually talk to people in front of their face, and they hate it sometimes, but I do, it didn't matter whether he was deaf or not, or these people were deaf, because I was actually interviewing them in the correct manner that they wanted me to, you know, so the resonance was there. But it's amazing you can go for a whole interview and not realize that someone's deaf, and that they've got aids in their ear, and you know, it's just incredible. So it's people, I know, but people sort of have different ways if they're deaf of like you said, the vibration, lying down on the floor, sight reading, lip reading and stuff. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
How we can access.
Go round things as
But what I'd like to know, when you're talking about Helen Keller, I would like to know, and I don't think I'll ever know this because I'm not inside their head. I'd like to be inside their head and feel what they're feeling and see what they're seeing.
the woman was a genius.
Yeah.
That's what it really was. She was a genius. She was able to, it was someone else. It's like not having, she decoded someone else's language through touch. And she was able to pick up on that to shape the world that Gilly has just spoken of in terms of what the outside world was. That is remarkable. And, you know, and that's why she's still known to this day in our collective memory. But yeah, anyway, Antoine, it's your show. Tell us.
So let's focus more on the text. And I think this text is saying something that we can question or comment on, which is here. Music affirms and potentially corrects, moderates and modifies our relation to the world, repeatedly re-establishing it as the Ur relationship, or the basic relationship, if you want, from which subject and world originate. Why do you think this is important if we are dealing with the course that we are making today, or in general, and which is also the subject of the book, modernity?
We lost you. Modernity, thinking in, what was it? Thinking in the present?
Yeah, we are trying, yeah, exactly. We are trying to question what is modernity, and that is what is the focus of this book as well, or modern world, or modern society. And I read the sentence to you again. Music affirms and potentially corrects, moderates, and modifies our relationship to the world, repeatedly reestablishing it as the Ur relationship from which subject and the world originate. And you see, he's just before this sentence, he has the words modern society. In modern society is capable of fulfilling in modern society. Why do you think it is an important function?
Because there's so much that is dissonance.
Yeah, so much dissonance, so much loss of what that we have tried to understand. Connection, exactly.
Loss of connection.
Loss of connection.
I think it's also about what we value. There's a loss of what can be valued. So we've got a very materialistic view where bankers can make millions, and that, you know, you can see the guy who is actually making you vibrate in the street by playing music, and he is in the street. He's in the street playing his guitar, and he can actually make you feel something compared to the banker who's doing whatever he's doing. And yet he's the one that makes all the money, and the guy that's actually making you feel something, it's not necessarily rewarded. So I think, but to a certain extent, because we can feel that within, then we still value it personally. But I think part of the problem in this modern world is when we think about music, is that it's now become a business, and that as a result of becoming a business, you can find that music has become so commodified that they can capture the essence of, and artificial intelligence is doing this now too. But before it would be just a computer and a box can play all the instruments. Now artificial intelligence will even take the theme of how Frank Sinatra sings an air or sings a tune, and it will recreate that for different songs, but in a Frank Sinatra style. So I think it's still important for us as individuals to feel for music so that we know that we are human.
I don't think, very excellent. I don't think the word human is the most important here, because other animals feel music, and it's important for them it's important for us to have this link with nature, a musical link to nature. And I don't know if you've experienced that, but if you play music, be it your own music on a guitar or on a record, there are sometimes birds that come sing with you.
Oh, sounds great.
Most of them are the blackbirds. How do you call them? The very good whistlers. I forgot. Robins. Robins are often coming to play with you.
Wow.
I think bluebirds do my hair into little plaits, actually.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I don't think we should say that music is only human. Yet I think we should go towards this idea, on the contrary, that it is a way for us human, and maybe other species as well, to stay connected with the rest of nature. To stay connected with the rest of the people, with other people, and with ourselves. So it's a form of relation, and that can be qualitatively modulated and therefore transformed, and which is a way for us to work on ourselves as well. You can say that music and the practice of music is a technique of the self. You know that Foucault, in the last period of his life and work, has insisted on that, on the techniques of the self, to show that there were powers exerted on us, discipline and then control through many techniques, but we can actually fight in a way, in a good way, the assujettissement, the subjection, the powers to which we are subjected by other techniques, such as having a diary to know what to memorize things better, to build yourself differently, to create a form of protection from external stimulations. So a diary, practice of an instrument, practice of conversations with friends, certain sport, etc., etc. And I think music here is more interesting to focus on as an example of that, because it is indeed a way that you can perceive how musicians are able to create a very singular mood. And that's what we insisted on today. And this singular mood, the fact that we can, as a collective body, agree on the quality of a singular mood, makes us vibrate together. More so than a football match, because a football match is not modifying the quality of our relationship to the world, right?
Depends who's playing. If Brazil play, then it's an art form.
Yeah, but I agree that the idea with which it can be said it's art, yet I think in terms of quality of the resonance of a relationship to the world, music creates something very singular, as it is something written, as it is something that has to do with vibrations being written.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
And even I want to plug my computer and then come back with another comment.
It's not totally written, because you can have music that really resonates that's not written.
Exactly. So that was my second comment.
All right.
Is that
You stole it,
if we
Susie.
are dealing,
Sorry.
Boom, boom.
if we are dealing with the idea of improvisational music, which seems not to be written, it's still written. Why? Because it's written in the moment that it's played. That's the difference.
That's what I would have said as well, Antoine.
Okay, wonderful. Sorry for my messy hair. And
Not messy. Good.
I did watch a football match on TV the other day, probably because of all this stuff about Maradona, but it was actually it was on the BBC. It was about Brazil winning the World Cup in 70 and Argentina in 78, and the political backdrop and how dictatorships used those two football teams for its own purposes to make themselves more popular. But when you did actually, it's a weird thing. You did mention sport earlier, so it does make us feel, and when it is something that is it can transcend something, because I think it is a form of communication in the way that these people somehow, without obviously it's a distance that the ball is kicked and it's a pig's bladder, it's not that exciting in itself, but it's amazing how the actions are quicker than even the thoughts. It's just so instinctive, and sometimes it can be quite beautiful in its own way. That's all.
I agree with that, but the point I'm trying to make is not in contradiction with what you're saying. The point I'm trying to make, and in a way it's a link with what we're going to see next time, and we're going to keep the text on poverty for the time after that. The point I'm trying to make is to say that the musicalization of our relationship to the world is a way of writing our moods. Okay. And writing our moods is important in time, modern times, if you will, or all modern times, when the script seems less and less clear.
Okay.
There is this famous French philosopher named Jean-François Lyotard, who defined postmodernism or postmodernity as the era of the end of long-term narrations. He was saying with people such as Hegel, you would have a long-term narration of what history is, And in a sense, history would be the realization of the spirit of God or the world or the universe, if you will, becoming clear to itself, a consciousness through mankind of the spirit to itself. So therefore, let's understand it very simply. You have a bunch of civilizations, and each civilization brings something, then dies, and then there's another one that comes up and brings something else. But the new one encompasses, in a way, the past ones. And so in Hegel's philosophy, the philosophy, history is a process of becoming better and better, of becoming more and more spiritual. And that's why, for instance, we have better and better music. That's arguable if you want, but we could say that the music used to be very primitive, and now with wonderful instruments that we have now, we are able to make symphonies and so, right?
I think that's arguable anyway, because throughout history, different cultures have made music to tell stories, sagas, to storytell, to pass on, news and stuff like that. And we do it in England also with folk tunes and at disasters, when we're probably very perplexed, we tend to write songs about the disasters to try and clarify it. That bit I actually totally understand, yeah. But to say that anything's better or worse is different, because there's always been instruments, and there's been some sort of symphonies of nature along with the instruments, and all sorts of ways of portraying that music.
But wait, because I think I agree with you more than you think I do. What I'm saying is that with the 20th century, nobody, most philosophers were not able to think in the same way that Hegel was thinking, because there were two world wars, and because obviously culture became, to quote Nietzsche, decadent.
And God also is dead at this point.
Yeah, it became less and less good. So far as to listen to the music that's played on radio mostly nowadays, which is barely music. And very few people would remain Hegelian in a naive way nowadays. Even Hegel was not Hegelian in a naive way. So what I'm trying to say is that the musicalization of our life is not a whole symphony narrating the whole history of mankind being better and better nowadays, but it is allowing us to fix our lives and to find some kind of collective harmony in a world that is more and more threatened by a complete dissonance.
Boy, that's pretty powerful.
I hope a little bit, but
yeah, no, it is. It is.
So
do you have a feeling about therefore the kind of the consumerism that I think you mentioned earlier, the consumerism element to music, and the fact that now there are so many options, so many platforms, so many streaming things, so many bands releasing music. I feel sometimes a little overwhelmed that I know my grandfather wanted me to get into classical music. I've done a short course on jazz to try and understand it. There's pop music coming out every day. I'm only scratching the surface. And so I feel sometimes overwhelmed by what that narrative of that story is, and that perhaps I need to be smarter and filter my understanding of what music would make me happy, I guess.
Thank you. You give me the opportunity to nuance what I was trying to say. I'm not saying that everybody should collectively agree and vibrate on the same band, like we should all recognize that the Beatles is so fantastic, or the Pink Floyd, etc. What I'm saying, actually, it's a good thing that there are all kinds of music, from Beethoven to Slipknot, that make everybody able to resonate differently, with all kinds of mood. It's good. So I'm not in favor. in favor necessarily of a global resonance, yet I think it's important for us to understand that music as a whole, in all its forms, in all its manifestations, if you will, has the power to recreate resonance, replug people, maybe not plug, re-resonate people, where when they are in experiences of alienation to the world, you know, in a way, even, yeah, just one example,
Okay.
even if my way of resonating with the world is Marilyn Manson, for instance, it's still better than being completely estranged from the world.
Okay. I just wanted to go back to what Gilly had said. Sorry, I've noted what you said, Antoine, not to sort of just go back to Gilly there, but I understand. My take on what you said there, Gilly, too, is that I think Bruce Springsteen said this in a song when he said 300 channels and nothing on, and he was talking about the TV, or Dire Straits with MTV. That in a way, there's a it's not so much just a proliferation, it's we're awash with it. So I think it is then harder to sort the wheat out from the chaff, as the English expression might be. I think there may be a tiny bit of that going on, but perhaps you have to switch off some of the channels and some of the platforms that you spoke of. What do you think?
It's interesting because there are lots of people I know who just listen to the music of their teenage years, as we were talking about. You know, that's the extra resonance that you have at that time in your life, and it's, you know, lovely. And they go to the 80s revival nights, and you know, that's what they love. I think though that I personally want to grow a little bit more and understand a lot more about the different kinds of music and the moods and the types of resonance that each music type might give me. So I guess if you sort of reframe it as an exploration of that opportunity, then great. Although I do feel sometimes that it gets very anxiety producing sometimes, depending on the mood I'm in. So, you know, okay. I know the pros and cons of it.
I'd like to just go back to what Anton was saying as well about Glastonbury, because when you think about Glastonbury, where it's got different stages, and some of them are small stages, some of them are big stages, you could just do an experiment with music and walk around, and you go to the different stages and go, you know, and there's all sorts of music resonating with all sorts of different people under one festival. And it's just incredible. And then you've got the main stage, the pyramid stage, and where they have the masses of audiences resonating to one musician. And I remember sitting in the acoustic stage, listening to a musician, and you could hear the main stage. You know, so you could hear people resonating while you're resonating with the musician that you are. You had no choice but to hear them resonating. But it was interesting. There's times when all that music is put together in a way, it's almost echoing. And it's quite weird, because you might be walking and not knowing your mood, and then you come across Chemical Brothers or something like that, you know? And it's like, whoa, you know, and you start resonating, you know, with whatever is what is ever your mood at that time. It's a wonderful experience, and it's a live experience. And that's what's so amazing about stuff that, you know, Fatboy Slim, for instance, even in Brighton, I remember when he did his concert in Brighton, masses of people, you know, all listening to the same.
That was more like a football match.
Yeah. So, and so it's about, you know, even if it's a small amount of people listening to something and they're resonating. Yeah. That's cool. I'm not sure about Manson, though.
Next
Made me
time
feel sick when you said that, because I was thinking, oh, fancy resonating with him. I couldn't quite imagine it anyway. Or I did, and it made me feel sick.
But is there, just thinking about Brighton, you spoke about Fatboy Slim, but we've also got Nick Cave. We've got the Levelers. We've got quite a musical culture down here in Brighton. I wonder if there's something that is needed for that musical culture to flourish. What are your thoughts, Antoine, on that?
Can you repeat, because I'm not sure I understood.
For instance, we've got quite a few musicians in Brighton, and I'm just wondering if the location of Brighton lends itself to that. You know, is it by being by the sea or being away from the main capital? Is there something in your thoughts that can?
Well, I don't know Brighton enough to answer your question. I think you would be better positioned to answer it. I do see, I think the positioning in the world has a lot to do with the style or the spirit of the music produced. You might be aware of that very cool website called Radio. I don't know how many O's you have.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So can you describe it, Julie, a little bit?
Is it the one that goes back in time, or is it the one around the world? It's the one around the world that goes back in time.
Well, with a map of the world, so you
Yeah.
select a country and you select a decade, and you play either fast or slow or both kind of music, and then it makes you travel through space and time, or space-time if you are Einsteinian, and it's really nice because you realize that how much there is that it is attached to a land. You know, we know that, but when you have this map and can really travel from a country to another, a decade to another, you have this sense of the space-time relating to music even more.
And you can click on, you know, Syria in the 50s, you know, and suddenly you're listening to the radio of Syria in the 50s, and it's so evocative because you're imagining the people and the, you know, the clothes they're wearing, and like maybe the sort of street area they're dancing in that night, and it's a lovely piece of humanity just to sort of have these sort of almost pretend memories of fun, or, you know, whatever it might be, a mood of that evening in that living room in, you know, Warsaw in 1920s, whatever. It's fabulous. Yeah.
So what is the radio called?
It's called Radio, but with about 3 or 4 O's.
I think at least 4. And
Okay.
and then what's interesting furthermore is that it's a wiki site, so you can contribute. You can put, if you have a collection, you can put music on. There's another website, or at least one, that shows a kind of a Google map of the world, and you have on it a lot, if not every, music radio channel that there is in the world. I can find it, but it will take me some time to do research to find it. I can't find it.
It's not internet radio, is it?
I think it's
internetradio.com.
It's probably that.
Yeah, because we're on that one as well.
It's a good
and they've
little
got-
plug there, Susie.
Well, yeah, but internetradio.com is like a server. There's a few people wanting to do that, actually. I know with community radio as well, but it's a server, and on it serves, if you pay a certain amount a month, not a lot, but it put your player on it, and then that is promoted all over the world. I mean, you could do it without it, but it's nice to know all the figures, because you can go into it and see who and find out who's listening to where. So it could be some, you know, people in America or Australia, and you'll know because you're on that server that it serves the whole of the world, and it's quite amazing station in that way. But there are other platforms as well.
I just want to make a conclusive remark to transition with next time. So next time we'll have this other text which also deals with music, but which deals with the effects of musicalization of the world in politics.
Cool.
Ah, nice.
And we will differentiate different concepts of resonance, such as one that has negative value in Rosa's text, echo chamber. An echo chamber is when people resonate, but it's kind of an enclosed thing. It's not a relationship to the world, it's a relationship to a kind of sect, you see? And we will try to make qualitative qualitative distinctions between the kinds of musicalization that can be operated in the political, perspective.
Great.
Sounds interesting.
Mm.
Thank
Thank you.
you very much. I'm
Thanks
sorry.
very much.
Yeah.
Thank
All
you
right,
very
see you
much.
next
And
week.
are we going to hear some of this music?
I think I'm gonna post some of the things I had in mind when I did this class, which is first the 400 Blows clips.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think one other French New Wave film that's very interesting in these regards is the movie Breathless by Godard, because he uses two very distinct styles of music, one jazzy and one which we would call classical, and they create the very two trends of the movie, which is one that goes in the direction of the love story, which is the classical one, and one that goes in the direction of the detective story, which is the jazzy one.
Oh.
And sometimes it's really interesting to see how Godard is to mix them, like cut one and put suddenly the other one to create some kind of dissonance to say to the viewer, it's a movie made of several genres.
Wow.
Interesting.
Cool.
Do you think the jazzy is almost to reflect that gumshoe stroke private detective world of the 20s or something? Is
Very
that,
much
yeah?
so. There are clear references
Film
to
noir kind of thing.
that. Even more
Your internet connection went.
even more the hello.
You're still
Hello,
there.
hello?
You're still there,
Uh,
Antoine.
Yeah, even more the reference to the American dark cinema, dark detective
Film noir.
film
I think
noir.
we call it film noir ourselves.
Exactement.
Yeah. Film noir. Thank you very much. I've got to go now. So bless you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Come on,
you,
come on, come on.
Well,
So we're closing down.
Yep. Bye-bye.
See you next week, James. See you, Nimali.
Scott, see you, Antoine.
Bye.
You see you.